Hello and welcome into another exciting, stimulating, and dare I say, gesticulating episode of the 10 Ton Talk Show. My name is Clay, and this week we're all going to be highlighting 3 records from the recent past that we think flew under the radar. And, as per every week, we're going to highlight the record, or at least a few records from this last week that we think you should be listening to. But before we get into that, let's meet the rest of our cast.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? My name is Mitch, otherwise known as Blue Collar Black Metal on all the socials, or BB if you happen to know me. I am here, just like every week, as an undercover country defender and a registered poser.
And of course, that leaves me. I am Cosmo, or Brian, but you could just call me Cosmo if you want. And I am the being who listens to way too much metal. And music in general. And have opinions on everything.
Perfect intro. Nailed it. So let's start with you, Beebs. What is something or some things that you've heard this last week that you want to highlight?
Alrighty, so for this last week, I will say that my recommendation is only tangentially metal, and also technically came out the week before last. So I'm breaking 2 rules all over this place, but as I pointed out already, I am a registered poser, so I'm legally allowed to do that. And the album that I'm bringing to you for your listening pleasure this week, and is an album that is actually, I would argue, a lot more evil than your general run-of-the-mill black metal record or dirty death metal or any other sort of twisted abomination you're going to put in your ear holes this week. And that is by a band with the evocative name Crippling Alcoholism. And the name of that record is With Love from a Padded Room. Now, this is a band that was not on my radar whatsoever. They had a record that came out in, 2022. That record was When the Drugs That Made You Sick Are the Drugs That Make You Better. It's a fantastic record by all accounts. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with it. So far, though, I have spent a ton of time with their most recent record, With Love from a Padded Room. It is a record that is hard to classify. It has elements of noise rock, post-rock, post-metal, and a big heaping scoop of goth in the vein of these more storytelling focused goth of somebody like Nick Cave, with a similar style of almost crooning baritone vocals. The album is perverse, it's upsetting. The vocals are delivered oftentimes in a very languid, almost sociopathic manner. That really undercuts or emphasizes, depending on how you want to look at it, kind of the horrors that are being described there. I've seen some comparisons to Chatpile, and I think that is a good comparison, not necessarily sonically, but in the same way that they approach really rough topics and situations and storytelling in a both very direct and very artistic style. A interesting comparison that I've heard between the two, though, is that whereas Chatpile is more describing or narrating an evil act, Crippling Alcoholism is embodying that character. And in some ways, I think could be considered the band that is playing as you arrive at the gates to hell would be a great venue for Crippling Alcoholism. Y'all, what did you think of this band? This very strange metal, not metal kind of album that came out.
Well, I am not a guy who likes goth or Nick Cave or any of those bands you mentioned all that much, and yet I really enjoyed Crippling Alcoholism. The lyrics were very poignant, they were very dark, very upsetting, just all the stuff I kind of look for in that sort of thing and never find. So, good rec. Thank you.
Yeah,
excellent.
It is a harrowing record that counts as can be recommended to metal people because of the way that it sort of gets under your skin and it cuts sort of to that same level of evil that metal often does. Kind of the same way that like Lingua Ignota's Sinner Get Ready isn't a metal album, but it is a harrowing record. This hits on a lot of the same vibes where you feel very uncomfy the entire time you're listening to it. So it's something that I full-throated and wholeheartedly can recommend as a great goth rock, noise, punk, post-hardcore, not even post-hardcore, post-rock. I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those things that's hard to define, hard to label, hard to like put into a category, but you know when you hear it as good and spooky.
100%. I think, honestly, if anything that we just said here about this record is interesting to you, just listen to the very first track. You will know pretty quickly whether or not it is for you. It is a record that somewhat defines classification, and the best thing to do with records like that is drop them a listen and maybe potentially find something that never would have been on your radar before, that's not necessarily your usual wheelhouse. You'll never know when it's going to hit you.
And it's a very good slow burn record that you can put on, and then all of a sudden you're into it for quite a ways, where you're like, wow. It'll suck you in, and it'll take you on a journey, and it's not a fun journey, but it is a journey worth taking if you're into extreme art and the way, like you said earlier, they take on sort of the role of the bad guy. Like, it is a record from the point of view of many convict types within a padded cell. It is getting a sort of inner monologue of a mentally insane, psychopath describing some of their worst deeds.
Yeah.
I would say go ahead, make sure you're reading the lyrics when you're listening to this album. Otherwise, it will not hit you as hard.
Yeah, I will say, if you are listening close, though, the lyrics are pretty, outside of a couple of points where they do kind of get a little, like, there's more noise going on, so it might be hard to pick out exactly what he's saying. The delivery is also, again, that kind of baritone crooning style. So you can follow pretty closely what's going on for the majority of the record. It's just, if you're the kind of person that's more likely to let something that maybe has a little bit more ambience in it wash over you, it's definitely one worth paying closer attention to really allow it to kind of work its magic on you.
That's where I think the Chat Pile comparison isn't sonically the same, but lyrically is quite similar, where it is easy to pick up on the lyrics and you're like, oh, this is unsettling, because the words are so forward in the delivery of the music, where you're like, oh, hammers and grease, and also who's gonna miss this little slut? You're like, oh, I don't like that. And you're like, oh, and he's doubling down. Oh, and it's getting worse. Like, the same unsettling, the lyrics are so upfront and delivered with such a flat grimness that you're like, I can't help but pay attention to what he's saying. And what he's saying is hurting.
Yes, 1,000%. And I think my one final observation, if you can't tell, I'm really passionate about this record. I've listened to it a ton in the last couple of days. I think it's an early contender for me as another lister. But my interesting comparison was more so than music, actually. I watched a movie last night called Killer Joe, which is a Matthew McConaughey performance based on a play where he plays a detective who is also a hitman, and not in a fun way, in a, like, he is a sociopath, and he basically mockingbirds this family and takes over their home, and, like, it turns into this whole really creepy, like, he's very eloquent and then immediately will snap to violence at the drop of a hat. It's a very good movie if you like slow burn, kind of Southern noir, and there's a grimness and a darkness to that film that dovetail just, I hate to say beautifully, because there's nothing very beautiful about either one of these things, but very perfectly dovetails together. It's a very cinematic record in that way.
Poignantly in that sense?
Yes,
then?
there we go. Yeah, very poignantly dovetailed together. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of stuff like that really looks at the ugliness of life and human behavior and kind of the dregs of that, particularly when it's able to not just look at it from the outside, but intent to kind of embody that. But that being said, if you can't tell, very passionate about this record, but I am going to cede the floor now to my good friend Clay to chat about what you heard this last week that you enjoyed.
All right, so I too enjoy abject misery and looking the void in its eyes and holding an uncomfortable stare. But when I'm not doing that, I'm drinking rum on a ship, and I'm sailing the high seas, and I am rollicking. Because my recommendation is also not metal. It is acoustic pirate folk, the Dread Crew of Oddwood. It is some of the funnest, most fun bullshit music I've ever heard in my life. Like, you can pour up yourself a glass of rum, just straight rum, no ice. Just, like, get yourself the biggest glass you can, just pour a shitload of rum in there, and put the Dread Crew of Oddwood on, and I guarantee that you're going to have a good time, but also you might hate it because it's pirate folk. But I can say with a bullet that I loved it. So, pirate folk, the Dread Crew of Oddwood's Rust and Glory. Give that a shot if you're interested at all in having a good time. If you're like, listen, fuck convention, I don't play by the rules. I just want to have a mandolin strummed while a guy talks about how much he loves leather. This is the record for you. But on a more metal note, actually, do you guys have something to say that you want to...
I was gonna say, don't give it a shot. Take the whole bottle with you. Like it is, it is. I don't like pirate metal, and I was wrong thinking that this was pirate metal.
It's not
It is
metal.
actually pirate. It is not metal. It is pirate folk in the same way that a band like Flogging Molly plays Irish music, where it is grounded in that same sort of sense. But there's an edge to it, and a rollicking good time on top of it. It is not what I've been the mood for, but I will say, should I feel a little she shanty-y, this is definitely a record I will reach for to scratch that itch. It's just fun and it's well performed.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of it at first when I first started off the record. And then as I got through the record, I was like, fine, it's fun. So you win this one.
It navigates the waters, the choppy sea. It navigates the choppy sea of cringe and silliness in a very deft manner, where like by the time they hit a song that's like, give me your beer, you've heard many a song that's probably been about give me your beer, but they do it in a way that's just a little bit sillier and a little bit funnier. And some of the songs are about how their crewmates keep dying, and they're like, oh, sweet, another dead one? That means more beer and more gold for me. And they do it with just such the tongue-in-cheek is so firmly planted, but they're so deft with their ample jumping over of sort of the hurdles that would stop me from enjoying a record this silly, that it clears all of the boundaries that otherwise would be an immediate eject and nope. So I can give this a full-hearted, this is fun and good, and not metal, but good. On the metal front, I will want to just sort of point out Weston Super Maim, which I haven't looked up what that name means or why they're called that, but Weston Super Maim does sort of mathcore, breakdowny, genty music with a also similar amount of silliness to the Dread Crew of Oddwood, where there is a silliness akin to sort of the way that Beaten to Death does grindcore, with some beautiful passages and has silly song titles. Weston Super Maim also has silly song titles, but does chug chug pew pew sounds that do hit home. There's a Frontier feature, there's a Blindfold and Led to the Woods guy feature. Like, they've got a few people putting the stamp that of bands that I do really like, helping them out in the background. And so that's another band that I can say, if you like chug chug pew pew silliness, Weston Super Maim, good record. Pink record supremacy.
Hell yeah. Yeah, no, that was a fun one too. It's a good gym record. I definitely enjoyed having it on for that. It's good, high energy. It's fun. Fuck it, check it out. Listening to fun stuff this week. What about you, Cosmo? You listening to fun stuff?
You know what? I like that one too. It was surprisingly up my alley, and normally that type of stuff is not my thing at all, because I am not a metalcore guy by any stretch of the word. But you know what? 2 for 2 Clay recommendations for me this week.
I was having fun. Yeah, Cosmo, it's all you.
And now I get to regale you with my shitty recommendations. So first off, we had Stress Angel with Punished by Nemesis, which is a blackened thrash metal band. It's just blackened thrash. It's very fun. If you like blackened thrash, you'll like it. It has more of a speed metal tinge than a thrash metal tinge. I see your head shaking there, BB, and I know you liked Iron Witch. I'm going to make sure that you like Stress Angel too. Next up is Corpus Diavolis with Elixeria Ecstasis, which is basically the band Mepharash, but 1,000 times hornier. The lyrics are a little bit uncomfortable at times, but it's actually really solid ritualistic black metal. So if you like it, if you like Mepharash, you might like Corpus Diavolis. It's also very long-winded, but it's fun. And then finally, I just want to touch briefly on Sacrificial Vein, dissonant, heroic black metal, very good hell sounds. We like the hell sounds here. Did y'all get a chance to listen to any of those things I just mentioned?
I did listen to Stress Angel, and Stress Angel is good. I wouldn't directly compare them to Spirit Possession, but the same way that, like, if you are a BB guy that doesn't necessarily love thrash, you can still enjoy Spirit. Did you like Spirit Possession? Oh no.
I did, and I need to give them another shot. Every time I've tried them, I've been like, nope, it's not clicking for me. And people really love that band, so I've kind of stayed out of the conversation on it. I definitely, if I bounce off something that other people are super into, sometimes I won't force myself to listen to it. I'll just be like, you know what, this is not for me right now. I might revisit it at some point when I'm in the mood and see if it clicks better, but no, that didn't really click for me. And Stress Angel, as I kind of alluded to, I basically spent this last weekend not listening to basically any metal, except for Sacrificial Vein, and tangentially related to that, the Crippling Alcoholism record that I already talked about. But I actually spent it listening to a lot of poser shit and also not listening to metal at all. So, no, I have not listened to Stress Angel. That would be the kind of record that I would put on if I'm saturating myself with metal, so I have space for some black thrash. Did not check it out, and I did not check out the horny black metal either. So I didn't even, that didn't cross my radar. I'm really curious.
Yeah, I was saying now
what
with that description, I didn't hear the horny black metal either, but now I need to, just because.
Yeah,
When you look at the cover of it, it's very immediately apparent. Like, oh, okay, this is really horny black metal.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm very well versed in horny black metal.
Oh, yep, no. If there is horny black metal, that is quite literally horny black metal.
Almost weregoat level of horny black metal.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
and
okay.
yeah, with the song titles, yeah, no, it's definitely got a little bit of that going on. All right, you know what? I'm literally perversely curious. I will check that out and let you know what I
Literally
think.
perversely curious. That's what I live for this show.
Hell yeah.
Alliteration.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've heard Sacrificial Vein about like between 1 and 800,000 times.
Yeah, but we'll get more into Sacrificial
Yeah,
Vein
we'll talk
a little bit later on.
We'll talk about that another time. Check it out if you like harrowing black metal. So let's transition now into the highlight of this episode, which is going to be each of us highlighting 3 releases that we think flew under the radar of the recent past, which we're calling roughly 5 years ago or so. And so I'm going to kick this thing off, and I'm going to start with my first recommendation being Polterguts, Gods Over Broken People. And this is a record that is hard to recommend because it's another one of those things that doesn't sound directly like anything that you've heard before. It is what I would call new sludgecore, in that it is sort of lightly nu metal, lightly sludgy, and post-hardcore, and or just regular hardcore, but kind of all those things wrapped up together with, again, very poignant and harrowing lyrics, things that touch on sort of the human condition that we are currently experiencing as millennials growing up in a world that hates us, that would pick gods over broken people, sort of the metaphorical, tangential, we'd rather go to church than pick up our fellow man. That's kind of a big overarching theme of the record. It's a harrowing one, and it's one that I can wholeheartedly recommend. It came out in 2022, so it's only 2 years old, but it is an amazing record. Moving on from that, on a more truly metal sort of thing, the very death metal band Deiquisitor with Towards Our Impending Doom. Deiquisitor is a band that flies under the radar, in my opinion, as far as like old school death metal goes, because they do an old school death metal that truly sounds like, you know, it belongs in that scene, and it's not directly aping any particular band, while being a little bit blackened, while being a little bit, there's still some modern sensibilities to it, but it's just like really, really good death metal inspired death metal. You know, it's like death into death a lot of the times, and Towards Our Impending Doom is my personal favorite Deiquisitor record, and I'd encourage you to just check out pretty much any Deiquisitor, but that's the one that I think is the best. And then, to finalize my top 3, is going to be Worn Mantle's self-titled Worn Mantle. And that is a record that is noisy, blackened, deafened, eviled, just like crushing hell sounds. The same way that we've recommended hell sounds on this thing before, Worn Mantle's Worn Mantle is one of those crushing hell sounds records that is a trip and an experience. And if you go in it and you put it on, go into a dark room, and just like let it wash over you, you are going to go for a ride that is very impressive. So, Worn Mantle's Worn Mantle, Deiquisitors, Towards Our Impending Doom, and Polterguts' Gods Over Broken People are going to be my 3 albums that I recommend. Now, I'm going to toss it to Beebs. Give me your
Hell
3.
yeah. Well, those are some great records right there, Clay. And I have 3 records that I think are pretty fucking good, too. First one I'm going to start off with, which is both a record that I love recommending to people and a more recent personal disappointment, because I just found out that this band no longer exists, which is very sad for me. But that band is a band called Implore, with their album Burden of Existence from 2022. Now, Implore is a German band. They play a mix of, I would say at its root, it is chaotic hardcore, but it is not chaotic hardcore taken toward a metalcore direction. It is chaotic hardcore that is topped off with a big scoop of death metal with a big helping of grindcore and a whole bunch of other stuff. As you might have been able to guess from the title, Burden of Existence, they are very upset, and they are going to tell you about why they're upset through a variety of big blasty parts and just neck-shattering breakdowns. A couple of my all-time favorite breakdowns are on this record. Like, full stop, there's a couple of bits that just make you want to throw your desk across the room. Can't recommend it hardly enough. Super bummed they have broken up, but I am hopeful that whatever bands rise from the ashes of this project approach their genre with as much intensity and, let's say, generosity of neck-snapping riffs. In a completely different direction, a genre that has not yet been recommended on this show, but a band that I will always go to bat for, is a band called Vandor, with their record On a Moonlit Night from 2021. Vandor plays, and you're not going to believe this based on the tenor of our show normally, power metal. That's right, you got pirate folk and power metal on the same episode of 10 Ton Talk Show, and I'm sorry. Vandor is... Vandor is a band that plays what I would call more of a classic style of power metal that is Euro power, not in the way of the really schlocky kind of symphonic stuff of the last 10 years or so, but more indebted to things like Blind Guardian and Halloween. But with a lot more, I would say, on the Blind Guardian side of the scale, where they're more comfortable not just going breakneck the entire time, with kind of long, slow, epic passages, great bass performance, which you know I'm always a huge fan of, but just big, hooky, fun, sword-swinging songs. If you like power metal, particularly of that more throwback style that isn't just heavy power necessarily, definitely worth checking out. It's a lot of fun. There's a bunch of parts that just make me grin ear to ear. Highly recommend On a Moonlit Night by Vandor.
It's also very cheesy. He's leaving that part out.
Yeah, yes, it is cheesy, but I would say it is more cheesy in the way that all power metal is cheesy, and less cheesy in the way that something like Fellowship is cheesy. So, maybe more of a stinky Gruyere than it is a big old tub of American cheese or whipped cheese product. And then with that disgusting metaphor out of the way, I'm going to hit my final recommendation, which is a band recommendation. They only have 2 full-length records, so I'm recommending both of them because I think they bookend each other very nicely. And that band is Universally Estranged out of Texas, with their records Reared Up in Spectral Predation from 2020 and Dimensions of Deviant Clusters in 2022. Universally Estranged is one of those bands that I found pretty much by accident. Are you flying a spaceship? What's happening over there?
No, I'm just thumbs upping your rec.
Okay,
I didn't
gotcha.
thumbs up Vandor, but I can thumbs up this one.
Hell yeah. Yeah, Universally Estranged, super impressive. They play a form of psychedelic sci-fi death metal with elements of progressive death metal, technical death metal. They have old school analog synths, kind of similar to how Nucleus adds in not orchestral synths, but weird bloopity synths to kind of add to the cacophony. They veer wildly between these big swirling masses of riffs to these really chunky, really gritty stuff. And all that and the kitchen sink is performed by just one member. Which is nuts. It is a sole authorship band that sounds like a room full of people making a kick-ass record. if you like stuff like Time Ghoul, if you like stuff like Nucleus, if you like stuff like Blood Incantation, those sorts of records, and then a bunch of weirder stuff too. If you like stuff that's on the weirder side of the Finn death scene, Universally Estranged, either one of their records, check them out. Have a great time. Listen to them both. They're very well composed and they're not super long. So yeah, those are my 3 records for today. That is, again, Implore, Burden of Existence, Vandor on a Moonlit Night, and Universally Estranged. And on that note, Cosmo, I don't want you to be estranged from me. Why don't you tell me about your 3 underrated recs in the last couple of years?
Well, sure. So here's the thing. All of mine came out last year at some point. So first off, we're going to go with Haxprocess. Speaking of old school Blood Incantation, specifically the Starspawn days of Blood Incantation, Haxprocess and their debut album, The Caverns of Duat, is firmly placed in that level of just really nice, progressive, old school death metal, which is just really musically competent. It's really fun. It's actually progressive death metal and not just gent or metalcore that calls itself progressive death metal. So if you like Starspawn, if you like that old school progressive sound, you're going to love them. And I think they have a new album here too, so there's a little bit of icing on the cake for you. Number 2 is Excarnated Entity with Mass Grave Horizon, which is this just lumbering, monolithic death metal entity out of Portland. Just huge riffs. I cannot get enough of that album. I still listen to it every now and again. Fantastic stuff, and I will make sure to see them live if I ever get a chance to. But this is just their debut, and it sounds a lot heavier than a lot of the other death metal that came out last year. And my final one is hard to say, so bear with me here. They're Icelandic. It is Arstidir Lifsins with Hermalausas. Came out December 21st, 2023. Right on the cusp of like between 23 and 24 stuff. But epic pagan black metal. And now before you worry, they are not sketch at all. We don't talk about sketch things here on the show. So what this EP is what they're calling it, but it's really an album, is 2 tracks, each of them about 22 minutes of probably some of the most epic, story-driven, just washes over you.
I can back Cosmo up on this one. This one does rule. It's along the lines of like Havakruunu sort of stuff, where you get Havakruunu sort of deftly weaving melody and epic Viking shouty, chanty, singy stuff with actual real life riffs every now and again. You're like, wait a minute, what the fuck? So it is good. I'm backing you up on this one, Cosmo.
Yeah, they're my favorite Icelandic band, and they have a new album coming out this year. So fans of this, you're eating good. But if you don't know who they are, this is a fantastic jumping off point. I cannot recommend this enough.
Yeah, calling something that's over 40 minutes an EP feels wrong.
Is it really?
That's what they call it.
Jesus. Well, I love, I always say their name on Havakruunu.
Yeah.
At least their last record. So that's enough of a name drop to get me to give this one a good, honest college try.
It's in the same sphere as Havakruunu, which is why I'm very picky about that same kind of stuff. Like if you call something epic black metal, I'm like, I'm out. Then you're like, it's epic black metal, but it's Havakruunu. I'm like, okay, I'm back in. This is closer to the Havakruunu side of stuff.
Great. It is funny because I do love a lot of epic black metal, but it's basically only stuff that sounds like either Summoning or Havakruunu. And then everything else kind of doesn't do it for me. So, yeah, interesting. Nice. Well, good Rex, Cosmo. And good Rex as well, Clay. You love to see it. And good Rex for all of you. Go out there, do your homework, listen to the stuff we tell you to, because these bands are rad and don't get talked about enough, and deserve your listens and maybe even your financial support, or at the very least, your ears.
Yeah, and if you have other Rex for us, we're always trying to find the best and the most underrated of things. So drop a comment down below in our very real and very existent YouTube channel. And we'll check them out, and then we'll probably comment back and be like, not good. Just kidding. We're a beacon of positivity here at the 10 Ton Talk Show. And speaking of beacon of positivity, Cosmo, you want to bring us home?
Of course, well, this has been another fantastic, exhilarating, and dare I say, gesticulating episode of the 10 Ton Talk Show. Stay heavy, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
Woo!